You're broken down and tired of living life on the merry-go-round, and you can't find a fighter, but I see it in you, so we gon' walk it out. Move mountains, we gon' walk it out and move mountains.
Good evening, and welcome to another edition of the Rankin, Mon Valley, Pittsburgh section of the National Council of Negro Women. My name is Delores Dupree, section president, and joining me is our first vice president, Alecia Gibbs. We thank all of you who have participated in the past, and we hope that you join us again today. Our number is 412-231-2288, and you can call in and participate, and the number should remain on the screen. Today, we will discuss African and African American history with our special guest, historian John Ford. This program satisfies at least one of our national mandates, which is to disseminate information about issues affecting African American women and their families, as well as two of our national goals. One is to champion civil and human rights, and the other one is to celebrate and strengthen the African American family. Now, Alecia, would you be willing to read Mr. Ford's bio?
Most definitely. Good afternoon. John L. Ford. John L. Ford is a native of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, with family roots in Charlottesville, Virginia. He believes in strong family ties and proclaims firmly that knowledge equals courage, dignity, and vision. He recently retired from the John Hines History Center as a director in the museum's education division. The Hines Center is an affiliate of the Smithsonian Institution. Previously, for more than 30 years, he excelled in management positions with Mellon Bank National Association, Park Davis and Company, 3M Corporation, and was the first African American to work at the corporate offices of Harbison and Walker Refractories Company during the civil rights era of the 1960s. While at Mellon Bank, John completed bank management curriculums with the American Institute of Banking. Throughout John L. Ford's professional corporate career, he independently studied and researched African and African American history. His studies progressed further and examined areas of genetics and anthropology that give a more full understanding of African or indeed Kushite history. Enlightened by these studies and works, he aggressively pursued and procured collections of coins, documents, maps, and other artifacts that authenticate the essentials of ancient as well as contemporary Black history. Many artifacts in his collection date back to 2500 BC. And he maintains reference materials documenting Black history for more than 2.5 million years. His collection is known to be one of the largest in the nation. John's retirement from the Hines Center was short-lived. He was immediately asked to join the education team at Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Hall and the museum in Pittsburgh as a part-time consultant and historian. John has taught African American history at 2 Pittsburgh universities and continues to lecture and create exhibits for museums, universities, government, and community organizations. John also partners with major law firms that need his experience examining artifacts that are involved in litigation. John Ford is the recipient of many local and national awards, including those from the Community College of Allegheny County, Pittsburgh Public Schools Gifted Center, the United States Housing and Urban Development, the United States Postal Service, the United States Army Corps of Engineers, NATO, the International History and Education Division, the National Education Association, Henry Highland Garnet Society, African American History and Genealogical Society, and the Pennsylvania State Education Association. John L. Ford has also received media awards and is frequently asked to speak on radio and television to address all aspects of African and African American history. John was a consultant and commentator for the nationally released movie documentary about slavery and the Underground Railroad called Safe Harbor.
Well, thank you.
And
That was quite extensive.
Yes,
Yes.
it was. But welcome to the
I hope I
program.
can live up to that expectation.
Oh, you will.
I'm sure.
Well, thank you. Thank you very
Welcome
much.
to the program, and thank you so much for taking time out to impart some knowledge to our viewers and our listening audience about Africa, Africans, African Americans. And what are some of the issues
you.
you'd like to talk about today before we ask you some questions?
I'm pretty open. I do enjoy origin. That would be the origin of man, black people in particular. I do enjoy that. That has been my focus most recently. Certainly the Civil War era, I think, is important to us, as well as the area that some people call the age of discovery. I kind of have a tendency to call it the age of aggression, and that would be with the Vasco da Gama, Columbus era in the 1500s. And of course, the civil rights movement of the 60s. I'm a product of that.
Yes.
I was very much involved in that myself. So anywhere that I think will pleasure our audience is what I will try to address.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I understand that the first human discovered was found in Africa, and we have a clip of President Obama meeting Lucy. Can you please play the clip of President Obama's meeting?
And now is the famous Lucy.
Yes.
Dating back to 3.2 million years ago. And I don't think you had the opportunity to talk to her when she was in the U.S.
She wasn't. I did. She stood me up on my way.
She was in Texas, Houston.
That's exactly
She was
right.
in Santa Ana,
Yeah.
Seattle,
She didn't
and
get
New
to
York.
Washington.
And people actually, I saw people crying when they saw her. That connection that you can have with the earliest fossils is just mind-boggling, mind-blowing. So I will ask you to touch one of these bones. What you're doing is touching a human being that existed 3.2 million years ago. And knowing that connection is simply mind-blowing, but also very important. Every single person here,
Is connected.
7 billion individuals, including Donald Trump, can come to this ancestry. I don't know about his hair, but
That's amazing. So Lucy was on the chain
Yes.
to Homo sapiens.
yes,
She's one of the first erect hominids.
exactly.
Interesting.
Very much so.
Yes. When we talk about origins, do you feel all humans are of African descent?
In a broad way, yes. The film that President Obama just spoke about, he was speaking about Lucy, which is a very ancient humanoid, and I say that because she would not be classified as what we call Homo sapiens sapien, modern day humans. Lucy would be more classified as what they call an Australopithecus, which had mixed features of both Homo sapiens sapien, the people who are living today, as well as ape-like features or simian-type features. And we find that type of skeletal history all over Africa. And that is indeed pretty old, Lucy is, but there are certainly others that are older than what they call Lucy. And again, they were Australopithecus or upright walking or biped walking Homo species that indeed were in Africa. But I do want to add that we found modern day Homo sapiens sapien people at the same time that we do find the Australopithecus and or the Neanderthal or Homo erectus. They give names to different skeletal finds that they have, in order to try to classify it in their line of progression from ape to modern day man that ends up in Europe. And it's totally flawed. My feeling is that there was, and I think we'll get into that. You mentioned it earlier. Frances Cress Wellesley had some questions on it. And her and I agree on a lot. But one area we do have some disagreement, but it's an interesting find and a large point to understand that there were Homo sapiens sapien, or black men that look and women that look and talk like we look and talk today, way back for 1.8 billion years, that we can confirm. So you say, no, these people existed, and these other people existed. Was there ever interaction? And we can now say yes. We have found common grave sites. The most recent was in Mount Carmel in Israel, where we found Homo sapiens sapien, modern day people. We found Homo erectus, another period of time, and we found the Neanderthal, a more recent
That's what I'm used
skeletal
to.
remain.
Neanderthal.
Yeah. So we have this evidence now, and it disproves the theory that people changed colors because of migratory patterns away from the equatorial base, and proves that there was genetic interaction as a consequence. And these genetic interactions most frequently were caused by cataclysmic events, volcanoes, or when the plates on the Earth shifted, which is the main reason that there was genetic interaction at the time of the, I guess, the Cretaceous period, when the continents started to form, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going too far, I know.
No, but before we show the skulls, though, we do have a call waiting, so we'll take this call and then we'll show the pictures of some skulls that you can discuss.
Okay.
Caller, please say your name and where you're calling from.
This is Matthew Moore in the Hill District, long-time follower of John Ford, friend of John Ford. When he had a station, he was at a station in Home Warriors called WCSJ. He did a show from Africa to America, and he has been doing a tremendous job in allowing us to know our black history, and I'm so proud of him, and I'm so glad that you have him on your show today because he's been extraordinary, and with his artifacts, he has a great collection of ancient African artifacts that he has on display on several occasions, and he doesn't go into anyone that in the truth and life will set you free. And he has brought the truth to so many of us Africans in America that we're very proud of him, just to know our history, and he's made it very clear to us that a lot of people didn't know that before. He brought some of the information that he has done to us and throughout America.
Well, thank you so much for calling. We were
Thank
just
you,
talking
ma'am.
about the station, WCXJ. We were
Yes.
just talking about that. We need that
We miss
station
it.
back. Yeah, we miss
do.
it. We really do.
I thank Matt very much.
You know what? That's what we need. That period in Pittsburgh, we have no black talk show hosts. We need that because to bring a different perspective, to let African American talk show. Let African American people call and express some of their feelings. And I think things would go much better in the city. This city has so biased and so racist against having African American talk show hosts, but I think we need to have everybody's voice heard, and I think that everything was better. I think that Pittsburgh and America will be much better with more African American being able to host the show, and that African American call and express yourself. And I think that a lot of racial issues will be resolved by that.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for calling, and we agree with you.
Thanks
And
again,
you have
Matt.
a good day.
Uh-huh.
Okay, thank you. So we were talking about the skulls, and you sent
Yes.
some pictures of the skulls, and we'd like to see
Yes.
the skulls so you can discuss those.
Okay. This one is what they call KNMER 1470. There's another picture of that gives us a better angle. I'm not sure if we will be
Yeah,
able
we
to
should
bring
have that one
up or
too.
not.
There were two pictures. Can we see the other skull also?
Yeah, that one's better.
Okay.
Now, this skull was found in...
And you can keep it up while he's talking, please.
Okay. It was found in current-day Kenya and found by an anthropologist by the name of Leakey. But that skull in particular, if we can put it back up on the screen again, I can point out some
Can you
very...
put that back up on the screen? Thank you.
Okay. Please note that it doesn't... If you look at the area above the eyes, they call that the orbital ridge. It does not have the indentation behind the orbital ridge as the ape does. And you also know the front of the face called the maxilla. It's very flat and it's not protruding out like the ape. And we can classify this certainly as a Homo species. As a matter of fact, what we have done is we've taken a side angle of this skull and put it with a side angle of the Sphinx, more correctly called, I can't think of the name offhand now, but you know what I'm talking about, the Sphinx.
We know the Sphinx.
Hermicat, it's called. And it matches up perfectly. The forehead, the jaw. Now this particular example is missing the mandible or the lower jaw. But certainly you can see that this is very human. And you can also see that there were certain injuries to this particular skeleton. I think on the right-hand side, that looked like a weapon that made that deep penetrated separation of the skull.
I'll see it here. Yeah.
Yeah. And we usually find skulls like this in lava pits or some type of catastrophe that happened because Africans had a very uniform way of burying their dead so that they would not be found in this condition. It was more, even before the Egyptians who wrapped their dead in mummies, Africans did other things where you don't find a lot of people in areas like you would find some of the other Homo species, if you understand what I'm saying.
Sure. Oh, thank you. And we do have another call. Caller, can you say your name and where you're calling from, please?
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Mark, and I'm calling from the north side. I am adjusting to your new schedule, your new time zone here for your show. And I'll adjust, and it will work out just well. It's perfect timing for me, so thank you for that.
Thank you. We love your calls.
I know,
yes,
Mark.
well, I appreciate the information that you shared. By the way, my children were able to get my wife and I a brand new flat screen TV. I think it's some ridiculous 50, 60-inch screen, whatever. But your picture on the screen is unbelievable.
Oh.
Your colors and your backdrop with the beautiful colors that you're all wearing, it just looks really nice.
Oh,
so
thank you.
I am a self-appointed president of the John Ford Club. And,
But I know Mark. I know Mark well. Thanks, Mark. I thought it was you when they said Mark from the north side. I said, that's probably, yeah.
And you know what? I'm always fascinated with the information that you share. But John, even more than what you're sharing, I hope sometime before this hour goes off, you let the people know where you're going to have your display, your samples or your history thing. For me, I am kind of a hands-on person and a visual person. And when they see what you have in your personal collection here in the city of Pittsburgh, that is in unbelievable condition with explanatory information with it, I think it would be hard not for a lot of folks to connect with that. So I hope you talk about that if you have anything scheduled that's coming up. But the question that I wanted to ask, and then I'll hang up, while all of this is so important, if you had to think about it, what would you do to make the connection with the African American youth of today, connecting them to the history of African American from yesteryear, and then teaching them how to apply the knowledge? We shouldn't run from mathematics. You know, we shouldn't run from education. You know, how do we find that kind of way? You can take some time during the show before you go off to kind of give your view on it. That's kind of important to me because I spent 16 years on the school board. We couldn't get African American history mandatory in classes. And so a lot of these kids, in my opinion, are always looking like they're wandering. Where's my place? What's my role? Where is my history? Does it start or end in slavery? And so all of those things were always left unopened. So if you could touch on that a little bit, I would really appreciate it. Thank you for the information.
Thank you, Mark.
Please let folks know where you're going to be having your art exhibit. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good job,
Thank you
ladies.
for calling. Thank you so
Mark.
much.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
that.
Have a good day.
So complimentary, and we appreciate that very much.
That's true.
Mark knows that I've done exhibits using what we call primary source documents. In other words, the actual document of enslavement, documents from Haiti, documents from the islands, et cetera, and artifacts. Now, I have to say something that I don't like to say, but I'm going to say it. As I extended my age beyond 70, and after much discussion with my children, I've begun to liquidate some of those artifacts because you can't take them with you.
That's true.
Now, there are certainly possibilities that I might display again, but it's going to be far and few in between, I'm sorry to say, because Mark, in particular, if you're still listening, they're heavy, man. And the artifacts are heavy. Most of them are framed up, et cetera, and I have to go to 2 or 3 different locations in order to get it set up. And then, too, on a disappointing note, a lot of blacks don't show up. And it's disappointing. Now, those who are really interested do, because as Mark suggested, our children need to know these things, and they would feel better. I brought this book with me. I was telling our hosts that this is a geography book, I'll hold it up, from the 1900s. And in this book that were in our children's classroom, the book that they taught from, they called African Savages. And this was well documented throughout the post-enslavement era. They kept telling us that we just weren't fully human, we were savages. So when you see that in print and know that children learn from these books, when you visit the past, you can best see how we are affected in our current state. This is what people know. And now, of course, some people are taught this through oral histories, or, you know, their parents are teaching them different things. And then, too, let me get on this, television. Television depicts blacks in such a bad way. And some of these advertisements, and I've written letters. Humira, if you're listening, that's a drug company. And I wrote the other one down. Vraylar, if you're listening, I got your number. Ford Motor Company, they do advertisements that I think help destroy the black family. And they consistently show the black woman being so much in love with a white man instead of being able to be in love with a black man. I think I answered most of Mark's questions. But yeah, Mark, I would like to display again when I feel up to it. Like I said, they're pretty heavy, and I don't actively solicit anymore. The last one I did was only about a year ago. I did several at Soldiers and Sailors, and they had a standing exhibit for about 5 years. And we were a little disappointed with the amount of people that came to see it. But anyway, Mark, you'll be the first to know. You and Matt.
And what you were talking about with that book, that's why we need to create our own schools that are geared for us, but
Yes.
that's going to be a difficult task. But it looks like we do have another call waiting. Caller,
Okay.
please say your name and where you're calling from.
Yes, this is James from the East End.
Hi, James.
Hi, James.
And your guest was saying that we used to be called savages. I think our president looks at us as being savages right now.
Yeah, yeah.
And my question is,
I think he
Did you
called us.
believe-
I think he called us. I can't repeat the word, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm with you, guy.
yeah, do you believe that Africans were here before 1619?
Here in the-
Oh yes, absolutely. You can find various artifacts, in particular in Central America and in particular Mexico, where they have different carvings, rock carvings of Africans, and you can tell they're Africans because of the big lips and the cranial shape of the cranial and the broad nose, and they date back way before 1492. Absolutely, yes, sir.
And just one more question. Do you believe America
Uh-oh. Did you?
Do you believe America will ever apologize for slavery? And also, do you think they should?
Well, yes, I think they should apologize. However, thus far they have avoided apologizing because an apology is an admission of guilt. And once you have that admission of guilt, then you're going to have to deal with the court system. You're admitting that you did wrong. So now, what would be the compensatory and in a court document, what would be the cost in reparations to blacks as a consequence of that enslavement period? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
So that's why they avoid that. But there have been many times there have been, as part of our legislature, issues surrounding reparations, and I think right now on the legislative floor there's another one that was pursued by the Black Caucus, the black members of the legislative branch. But there would be punitive as well as compensatory damages if they ever said that they were sorry, they apologized. You can imagine what the civil courts would do, saying that, okay, you've admitted guilt, look what you did. You've had, coming out of enslavement in 1865, you had 4 million Africans. And if you tried to pay them even minimum wage of what they did and what they suffered from, which would include rape and all types of social injustices, there's not enough money on earth. I did radio once in the 90s, WCXJ, and I computed out how much money would be owed, and it was such a large amount of trillions of dollars. I just don't remember the number. But take 4 million times the length of time that they would have worked as an enslaved person, the subject of rape, the subject of social injustices, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're talking about a huge amount of money that the earth has not produced yet. That's how bad it was. But I thank you for your call and your question.
Thank you for calling.
I just have one more comment. May I make another comment?
Uh-huh.
Yes, during slavery, white people had a habit of calling the slaves lazy as they were sitting on their porches drinking iced tea. So, sometimes I want to ask the question, if they were not lazy, why didn't they pick their own cotton and their own tobacco?
Yeah.
If they're not lazy.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
sir.
Thank you for your call. Have a good day.
Thank you.
So,
Appreciate it.
What he's talking about when he talks about them calling us lazy, that's what's going on now. When he calls fake news, he does. He does the fake news, and he tries to put it on us. But reparations, that question of reparations has been around for a long time.
Yes.
And I think something does need to be done. You know, they keep saying there's no way they can do it. They can do it. It doesn't necessarily have to be monetarily. There's still ways that they can, you know, do reparations.
Certainly, if nothing else, put it into the education system so
Right.
that we don't have books like this.
Right.
At today's school, and Mark, I believe Mark made it a point, they don't even teach history.
Not
to
our history.
Not where it should be
Right.
taught, or the way it should be taught.
And I understand you also taught a course on the Bible, you know, Africans in the Bible. Can
Yeah,
you
well,
expound a little bit?
it was part of a course.
Okay.
There are many people who feel that the Bible was utilized in order to help enslave Africans, and it was. But anyone who really reads the Bible from front cover throughout the Torah, that's the first 5-7 books of the Bible, it's all African. Now, they mention other people, but there are just so many things that we don't know. For an example, and I don't want to get into it too deep, this would take a whole show, but they do mention, indeed, 2 creations in the Bible, the first chapter and the second chapter. There's no question about that. As a matter of fact, in the first chapter, the first 2 verses of the second chapter really belong to the first chapter. They changed that. The first country mentioned in the Bible is, or was, Ethiopia. And because that was so well known today, they changed that in the newer versions of the King James Version. They changed that to Cush, which is still African. When they mentioned Noah and the flood, the reason God chose Noah is because he was perfect. He was a just man and perfect in his generations. And if you look back, when they talk about generations, they were talking about his genetic lineage, his generations. But people want you to think that he was perfect in this generation, which isn't the case. So there are just so many things like that that need to be exposed to people. And when you better understand the Bible, you become a better follower of your God, whether you're Muslim or Christian or Hindu. You have to understand things. And I believe it's imperative that we take time to understand those things that are amongst us every day so that we have a better grasp of our history.
And along those lines, why do you think it's so hard for even black people to believe that Jesus was black?
Well, because of Michelangelo. He painted a picture of Jesus Christ, and everyone now feels that that's the way Jesus Christ looked. And I remember growing up in the 60s. Everyone that I knew had a picture of John Kennedy, Jesus Christ, and Martin Luther King in the living room. And Jesus Christ was white all the time. There's no evidence, absolutely no evidence, that Jesus Christ was white. As a matter of fact, and I believe you have.
Yeah, we do have the coins.
Yeah.
Can you show a picture of the coin?
There we are. This coin is by the Byzantine Empire, 705 AD. That's 705 years after Christ died. And they were the first country to mint a coin with the portrait of Jesus Christ. And you can see the cross behind Jesus Christ. You can also see his tight, curly hair, which matches what they talk about in the Bible. Now you say, well, maybe that's the way they had to mint the coin. However, that's not true, because if we can show the other coin, which is of Justinian II, you see how they made his hair hang down, long hair way? See, so you can't say that it was minted that way because that's the only way they could mint it. So that coin, which is extremely rare and valuable, I wanted to bring it as part of the show to indicate to people, indicate to people that others made portraits of Jesus Christ before Michelangelo in our, if I can call it the contemporary period. And there are just so many other portraits of Jesus Christ and words of Jesus Christ that absolutely confirms that he was a black man. When they said that he went down into Egypt, if he was a white man, he would have been disclosed right away. But he melted into the population because he was indeed black. I mean, you just have to understand and look at things in a broad way and question yourself. And when you question yourself, you find answers. My biggest thing in history is not who, what, where, when, which is the standard, but why. I want to know why everything happened. I want to know why Jesus Christ went into Egypt. I want to know why they made a school book like this. Why did people call us savages? What did it do for them? You know? And when you look at all of those things, then you become acquainted with the genetics of a person. Their, what I like to say, their emotional quotient, their EQ, as well as their IQ. And their EQ is very important. Because if you had a large amount of EQ, and I'm getting into a long story again, but I'll try to make it short. I'm thinking about the bubonic plague that happened in Europe, 1350. And the gun was introduced right after that. China had the gun, but the gun had never been used to kill people. But when it was advanced into Europe, that's what they used it for. But you can still have the gun, but you have to have a certain lack of EQ in order to use it to kill people. And that's shown throughout. We were talking earlier about the period that's called the Age of Discovery. We have to understand that this Age of Discovery, and people know Christopher Columbus and they know Vasco da Gama in the late 1400s, early 1500s. They have to know that the indigenous people in North America and Central America in particular, we know there were 90 million totally killed. That's a lot of people. And in Africa, we know there were 35 million enslaved in North America, the Caribbean, and South America, and Europe. That's a lot of people. It was the largest forced migratory pattern ever in the history of the earth. That's a lot of people. And you have to have a lot of genetic flaw to do that for the extended period of time. And I say genetic flaw because you might be missing some of those genes as a consequence of genetic interaction with Homo species. You might be lacking that. And as a consequence, you're able to do those things that really bring harm and did bring harm to the earth. I mean, we're not in great shape now because of the period of time that we went through all of this huge migratory transition. It certainly hasn't been good for black people to this point.
Right.
So.
Yeah, definitely.
Don't mean to get off point.
No, you're definitely right there. Do you think that we can ever actually trace our true heritage? And, you know, they just appear to have done so much to tear our families apart and to destroy our history.
Yeah, we can do it. However, again, you have to be more precise. For an example, there's one advertisement on television now where a lady is wearing a hat, a Nigerian hat, and she says, I was able to trace my heritage back to Nigeria. That's fine, but we have to understand that Nigeria is a contemporary name. It's a contemporary name because the people of Nigeria, in Nigeria as it exists today, they were Igbo, they were Yoruba, Hausa. There's so many different ethnic groups. So if you want to trace your heritage back, correctly, it should be traced back to that ethnic group that was forced together. And again, I don't want to get off the topic, but they had a Berlin conference in 1885 where they divided up Africa because Europe owned Africa. And that's how the lines got drawn for today and put all of these ethnic groups together. But in '66, there was a war, for an example, between the Igbo and the Yoruba in current-day Nigeria. They wanted their own country. And thousands were killed as a consequence, and it never was resolved. So those two ethnic groups, along with many others, are still in the contemporary country that we call Nigeria, with the capital of Lagos. So you have to be very precise when you want to trace your history back. And it's not good to just say, I'm Nigerian, because you can be Yoruba. You know, okay.
And you being a historian, are you able to look at someone and kind of tell from which ethnic group in Africa they came from?
You know, I used to be able to do it better in the 70s when I was studying it than I can now, because there's a lot of ethnic mixing. Because when they put the countries together, I mean, there were so many ethnic groups in current day Chad, so many different ethnic groups in current day Niger. You understand what I'm saying? That people are just like us in America. We're getting very well mixed. However, and I wanted to bring a document with me today to show you. They were buying shoes for their enslaved Africans in Pinkleyville, Mississippi. And they made a comment that a lot of these people were Mandingo, from the Mandingo Nation, and they had thick foot pads, meaning that there was a lot of flesh underneath the metatarsals and flanges. And that gives you a clue. Or the way the teeth are positioned in the mouth, a lot of times that's very genetic. So yes, sometimes you can tell. And I look at people now and say, she's Congo, or Ashanti. I'm wrong often because of that genetic mixing, but I was at Giant Eagle maybe a couple of months ago, and two women came in. And I said, I love the way you guys talk, et cetera, and I'm sure you're probably from what country? Not the Ivory Coast, that's where they said they were. I said Sierra Leone. And she said, no, we're Ivory Coast. I said, okay, I was close. And that's current day.
Do you think if most people knew about our African history, being descendants of kings and queens, how do you think that would change our overall situation today?
Oh, it would be large, because now we see things like what's in this book. We don't feel that good about ourselves. If we look at television, and they don't make us feel that good about ourselves. So it would change a lot. However, not all of us were kings and queens, but we had kings and queens as heads of our nation. And I call those people citizens. We enslaved citizens of the continent of Africa from many different nations. They were Yoruba and Igbo and, you know, different nations. And they were citizens of those nations. So, yeah. Did I answer your question?
You both certainly did. Yes, thank you.
Okay, and I wanted to ask you, I've read the Crest theory of color confrontation, and she talks a lot about Neely Fuller. And he talks about the word race and how they used race to separate people. And it was for white people to maintain domination over the world. And I was just wondering what you thought about race as it relates to DNA or genetics, or don't you think it even relates to DNA and genetics? And did they actually use that term just to separate us and to, you know, put us in categories?
No, that's a great question. Race is used to divide us, that's for sure. I think part of your question was, you know, how does genetics fit into that? Which is an extremely good question, because He believed, as well as Francis Cress Wellesley, that people were the same and they just migrated out of Africa and as a consequence became white in Europe. And that's been the contemporary belief for a long time. So that this migratory pattern was a consequence of being light-skinned. That is a flawed theory that is so bad. There's no way that your skin color was changed because you migrated out of Africa. You migrated out of Africa because your genetic content made you have that white skin, and you found that you could live better north of Africa. That's making a very, very, very long story short. You understand what I'm saying? Okay. But I'm saying that genetic interaction is the reason that some people became white and other people remained dark. I think all people were dark on this continent prior to genetic interaction with other Homo species. All people were black. You were meant to be black. Any mammal which came after the Cretaceous period that has white skin has an abundant amount of hair or fur. Just a law. But if you have black skin, you don't have a lot of hair. Like you find most Africans, unless there was a lot of genetic interaction, most Africans, or the whale, or the elephant, if you have dark skin and you're a mammal, you don't have an abundant amount of hair. But if you have white skin, that white skin has to be protected by fur or feathers or something. Otherwise, you are a consequence of disease. And I don't want to upset people out there, but it's just a fact. So that's why white people have more hair than black people, as an example. Now, because of genetic interactions, some of these things have mixed up, and you have different variations. But there's a law, in my opinion, and no anthropologist has proven me wrong. If you have black skin, you don't have a lot of body hair. If you have white skin, you do have a lot of body hair. And that's to protect you from the rays of the sun. And this makes me mad too. When they are advertising sunscreen lotion, oh, people, you got to get out there and get your sunscreen. Black people don't need that. You don't need sunscreen lotion. From Africa, at the equatorial base, we never had sunscreen lotion and we never got cancer.
But now they're saying we need it, but I wonder if it's because now we're mixing up, so now we don't have as much melanin or whatever it is that's protecting us.
The more fair you are, fair meaning light skin, the more you need protection. But if you have melanin, like you two beautiful ladies and even me, there's no absolute need for that protection because you were designed to be an extremely large part of this earth in the epic era that we're talking about. Designed. And if it wasn't that way, for an example, your hand has melanin, but the part of your hand that doesn't show has a lot less melanin. And it's because it's not shown all the time. Same with the bottom of your foot. This gets into a very long story.
Yes.
But there are reasons why people want to say what is said, because they can't explain the genetics of it. And if they took time, they could explain it through genetics, but they can't explain it through the environment. For an example, real quick, we talk about the equatorial base, which is an imaginary line going around the Earth, which dissects Africa almost right in the middle. But if you're north of that equatorial base, you have Europe. South of the equatorial base, you have Southern Africa, Australia, and so on. So if environment caused you to have white skin, as you do in Germany and France, then why didn't that same distance from the equatorial line cause you to have white skin in Australia? All of those people, the indigenous people, the Aborigines as they are called, unfortunately, which isn't the correct name, and Southern Africans, they were all very, very dark. And there are dark people living and have lived in the Arctic for 10,000 years, and they haven't changed. So you just have to think about things so that people don't consistently give you facts, as they are called.
Fake
And
facts.
yeah, what do they call it? Alternative facts.
Alternative facts. Yes. When we talk about white people's domination and the control of the world at large, it's my understanding that they only make up about 1/4 of the world's population.
Yeah.
Why do you think it is that they appear to control the world itself?
Well, because of the gun initially, they had power. And they had money because they had enslavement. That's why. And now they have a big asset, which is television and other parts of media, which tells people that they are in charge. Have you ever seen a black person beat a white man up on television?
And not get away with it, not at all. Not get charged.
They will not show a black person
No.
beating up a white person on television,
No.
punching them and knocking them out.
Right.
They will not show a black man anymore with a white, et cetera, et cetera. You understand what I'm saying? Media helps you control these things because people look at media, 24/7?
Yes.
And it tells you that you're not equal to whites. White people are the stars.
That's true. Well, I know we don't have that much time, so I'm wondering if we could show the clip, because there's been a discussion about the N-word, and I wonder if we can show that clip.
We can use the N-word every day. We can sing about it, we can rap about it, as Terrence Howard suggested, because that's what we do. But the Jewish community says you can't use the words Jew me or kite me in a song because they understand the power of words. The police community says you can't sing about killing cops, even if it's just a song. You can't use the line, it's just entertainment. No, it's not just entertainment. Words have power. That's right. The white homosexual community says you can't use the F word in talking about one of the members of our tribe. You can't talk about, you can't joke about doing harm to a gay person. Why? Because they understand very clearly what you say goes out into the world. People hear it, and those mirror neurons say it's all right to do it. They know this stuff. And here we are still debating whether or not we should be using the N-word. Because we're the walking dead. Let's be clear. We are the walking dead. And so the essence of it, that word is one of the most hate-filled words that have ever been uttered by human beings. There's no way on earth you can make that word a positive word, a loving word, because there's too much death and pain and suffering associated with it. If you knew your history, if you understood what Dr. Ben was trying to teach us, if you understood what Malcolm was trying to teach us, if you understood what Dr. Clark was trying to teach us, if you could open up your heart, your mind, and hear their voice saying, baby, that ain't an appropriate word to use to call anybody. Wake up. Know who you are. Know what you're doing. And so the issue is, the unspoken truth is, yes, black lives matter, but the reality is white lives matter more. That's the truth. White lives matter more. And whatever white folks say is what we better do if we want to be happy and if we want to work. Problem number 4, right? I don't even have to say anything. Problem number 5.
That's exactly what I was talking about.
They say a picture's worth 1,000 words, right?
Now, before we talk about that last picture, though, What do you think what he was saying about the N-word? Because now they're coming up with this new thing where if you say it with the and not the it's okay for black people to call themselves that. And I just want to know your opinion of that.
I agree with him.
You should never use it no matter what kind of that. I agree also.
It has too many, it's just too historically erred and hurtful.
Right.
I wish it wasn't used.
Right, and then it's so unnecessary. I mean, because we're intelligent enough, if we want to call somebody something derogatory, we can use a different word.
Absolutely.
Why use a word that they created to degrade us?
That's right.
It's unnecessary. Oh, there's a call, one call waiting. Caller, can you say your name and where you're calling from?
Yes, I'm calling from Las Vegas. My name is Lori.
Oh, you
and
sound-
I just want to say I really enjoy your show.
Hi, Lori.
And hi, John. I wanted to ask John, could he share with us I didn't see the whole show, but what made you get started in just talking in Black history? Because you have done just a great service to our community and the world at large. I just want to hang up and hear your response on one person.
Thank you for calling from Las Vegas. Enjoy yourself, but listen to the answer.
I'm enjoying myself knowing that you are putting on such a wonderful show with so much information for Mr. Ford. Thank you all.
Thank
you,
you.
Lori.
Well,
Appreciate
you're
that.
welcome.
Thank you. She's in Las Vegas?
Yes.
Well, what goes on in Vegas stays in Vegas, right?
That's right.
Yes, as they say.
She probably
Well,
forgot.
now he doesn't.
You're still on.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to answer her question.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, let me answer the question. I got started really in high school. I came out of Westinghouse High School, and I was a coin collector. But then, as part of the civil rights movement of the 60s, I wanted African coins. So I started collecting African coins. And that kept my interest going until in the 70s, I started collecting documents and artifacts and continued that through the 80s. I've been collecting for like 50-some years, and I've always had an extremely large interest as a consequence of finding out so much information about myself and my contemporary black people.
Wow.
Cool, Lori?
Yes, that's awesome because I'm taking your classes before, and I've seen your presentations before. You've also given us so much great information. I still have coins that you were giving us if someone was college. I still think that coin is amazing. You started from collecting that coin. I will always choose you.
Oh, well, thank you. You were cutting up a little bit, but you said that he gave you all some coins and you still have it?
I still have the one coin. If you were a certain coin, you would get a coin. And
Oh.
I just felt like to have coins to think that he started collecting coins, and I have one of the coins that he may have started collecting with, and I'm just happy to have it.
Oh, well, thank you so much for calling and enjoy yourself.
Thank you, Lori.
And I hope he answered your question.
Yes, he did. Thank
Okay.
you so much.
Thank
All
you.
You all
right.
have a great show, and you have a great guest on today also. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori.
Safe traveling,
Appreciate
Mercy.
it.
See you when
And
you
be
get back.
safe down there and safe coming home.
Oh, well, thank you so much for coming and spending your
Thank
time
you.
with us. And we have more callers than we had in a long time. So
Good.
if we could just show the flyer. Before we go, we do want to let everyone know that we are having a luncheon on March 24th, and that's to celebrate some of the African American women in Pittsburgh that have done things to help our community. And they're women 80 years of age or older, and we started that to honor Dr. Dorothy I. Height, who was raised in Rankin, PA, and she was active until she was like 98. And President Obama called her the godmother of civil rights. Yes. So if anyone would like to come to that program, please call 412-953-9583. And thank you, Mr. Ford, for coming on, and we hope you can come
you.
back.
Oh,
We'd like you to
sure.
come back.
Thank
So
you.
you have an open invitation.
Thank you so much.
And thank you all for listening and calling.
Thank you.
And I hope you were enlightened and entertained. And we'll see you next time.
You're broken down and tired of living life on the merry-go-round, and you can't find a fighter, but I see it in you, so we gon' walk it out. Ooh.